things are developing very quickly now. I'm going to step out of the way almost immediately because you can see crews are on scene. That worker that you can see between the legs of Robert E. Lee's horse was previously just on the other side. I believe they are removing bolts that are in the statue's base that will allow them to lift the statue up. Here we go. This is the moment. The statue is off the base. And police in the town of Orange remain dedicated to finding her, moving the investigation into a new phase. And looking at Point of Fork behind me, two different groups see two very different things. Now those shells are being taken to the James River, where something this small is going to have a big impact. Earlier this month, Dr. Amita Sudhir was pulled over on this stretch of Route 29 in Greene County. And that has many loosening their ties and some, like Virginia's governor, ditching them entirely. Just 1 to 2 inches of rain from Hurricane Laura's remnants would be enough to cause some flooding in Stanton, according to the city's government. And while they're hoping for the best, Stantonians are preparing for the worst. The Wharf District was one of the hardest hit areas in both flooding events. There, the city has set up sand and bags for community members to take as needed. Amanda Evans and the Mary Baldwin University women's soccer team was on hand Thursday, filling and tying bags for the community.
We've been out here for at least a couple of hours. I would say we've probably filled up at least more than 200 bags. And we're just still going and getting as many as we can so when people pull up, we can help them out.
Evans doing it all with a 6-month-old on her back.
This is my 6-month-old Sochi. And yeah, he keeps us working hard too.
Sandbags from the pile already line restaurants and shops around the Wharf District, like the Bistro. There, owner Jeff Ramsey is hard at work picking up the pieces left by the last 2 flash floods.
Turn around and get hit 2 Saturdays after that. It was even more of a shock, especially after you had spent 2 weeks rebuilding. That was a bit of a setback.
Well, he would prefer no more storms on the horizon. At least this one they can see coming.
We're a little more prepared this time. The floodgates are out. We'll have those in place, and we've taken some other steps that fortunately, when a hurricane's on the way, we know about it.
The city has already announced several emergency measures. It's cleaning debris from creeks and storm drains to keep water levels from rising. It's also beginning a slow release of water from Lake Thames to prevent flooding downstream.
Nothing is a silver bullet, obviously. Nothing's an overall solution, but all these things together can help reduce the impacts of the flooding, and just watch the weather.
A moment of silence and reflection as the University Chapel tolled noon, and then the water flowed.
Water could mean resilience, it could mean cleanliness. I see it as just renewing.
And as the water flowed, the descendants and onlookers stretched their arms to the sky.
And we looked to the sky to say to them, the memorial was finally done, and we've done it, and here it is for you.
Celebrating the inaugural Descendants Day at the university, an emotional event for all involved.
Gratitude, resilience of the ancestors, resilience of the descendants.
It's been a long time coming, so we're very glad that it's being dedicated this weekend.
The memorial also serves as a bridge to the past, linking enslaved laborers and their descendants who may not have known of their heritage, like Apostle Sarah Kelly, the University Hospital's first black chaplain, who only recently learned of her ancestors' connection to the university. For that reason and more, the day was a special one.
Just known Detisa and her mother over 40 years, and I guess it just touched me because her mother's passed now, and I know the mother will be real proud.
Organizers are looking past the pandemic to a time when a larger celebration can be held.
We are looking forward to planning next year's event where we should all be in person, and we hope you'll all come back.
It's not a benign thing, racism. It's not something that's just a matter of people's opinions and impressions. It actually has a real physical and physiologic effect.
For black doctors in Central Virginia and across America, the health impacts of racism are more than something they've been treating and fighting directly every day. It's something they're living with on a daily basis, something that has only been heightened during a pandemic disproportionately affecting people of color.
I'm having difficulty describing it just because it's so visceral. It really cuts to your soul. And it's hard to put that in words sometimes. What it feels like to have a list and patients and families, and you know what they're going through. You might be going through a version of it yourself and your family.
There are documented, statistically significant disparities between Black patients and white patients.
Can you talk to me a little bit more about some of the specific disparities that we see and that you guys are confronting on an everyday basis?
Well, if you start with disparities in access to care, because again, you can talk about health outcomes, but they all come from somewhere. So there are huge disparities in access to care in terms of who has insurance, and then even beyond who has insurance, who can afford the care that they need.
African Americans have higher death rates for 8 of the 13 leading causes of death, and that includes cardiovascular disease, neurovascular disease, influenza and pneumonia, complications related to kidney dysfunction.
Disparities that can begin even at birth, with infant mortality rates twice as high and maternal mortality rates 4 times as high in Black patients versus white patients.
There have been a lot of people who have been working on this for a really long time. It's a very complex problem. Even in the emergency department, for instance, we know that people who are racial ethnic minorities, we undertreat their pain. We literally undertreat their pain.
But the doctors say the root cause of the disparities is racism itself. Black and brown individuals have a higher allostatic load, the accumulated wear and tear on the body from facing repeated stress like systemic racism.
What that does is it revs up your body's kind of fight or flight response and at pretty high levels a lot of the time. And that's why you see the higher levels of high blood pressure. That's why you see higher levels of cortisol, which can be related to diabetes. And so we do see that just that chronic stressor is an impact on health outcomes and health disparities.
Doctors say that increasing representation will go a long way to helping the issue in the short term.
For all Blacks, that's including African immigrants. Now, that's about 6% total of the physician population. So there's a minority group of us within a minority group of physicians.
But to solve the health disparities for good will mean tackling the systemic inequality that causes them.
We need to get to the root, and we need to address things head on so that we can get to a point where racism doesn't literally make us sick.
Erica Proctor, her ER nurse husband Kevin, and their 4 kids are used to big Thanksgivings with food and friends to spare. But this year, they're thankful just to have each other, even if they still have to be apart.
How do you teach a 2-year-old you can't give daddy a hug?
Since the start of the pandemic, the Proctors have had to take extra precautions.
One of our kids is a remarkable, fantastic superhero child and has some medical differences which make her a high risk for a serious infection.
That means Finn, Zoe, Ollie, and Eden have only been able to see their dad from a distance.
We decided together that he would move into the RV in the driveway. That way, if he was exposed to it, and heaven forbid he got sick, it wasn't going to expose our superhero kid or any of the other family members.
So for the last 8 months, Kevin has lived in the RV, but that's not stopped them from making the most of a bad situation.
He reads stories to the kids across the driveway. We got Nerf guns so that they can pretend to shoot each other from a distance. They've been, they kick the soccer ball around.
That includes how they celebrated this Thanksgiving with an eye towards better days.
A really wise person recommended to me last week that when all of this is said and done, that we take a week of vacation, and every day during that week, we celebrate a holiday that we had to miss.
What would your message to anybody watching this that maybe is on the fence about the mask, that maybe is on the fence about the social distancing, even at this point in the pandemic, what would your message be to them?
We can't just magically create new nurses to care for people. We might have enough hospital beds, they might be able to create enough spaces, but there have to be those healthcare workers to take care of people. We need to take responsibility for that. We need to stop thinking of our healthcare workers as the front line and start realizing that they're the last line of the defense.